After 13 years in the political wilderness, the Conservative coalition led by Stephen Harper finally took power in 2006. And for the next 5 years and through 2 more campaigns, Harper's ambitions were largely held in check by the reality of minority government. But with his majority win in 2011, he was free to do what he wanted. And halfway through that mandate, it might be time to ask, what is that? Well, with me now to talk about this are 2 people who have written extensively about the Harper years. Paul Wells of Maclean's Magazine and the author of the upcoming book, The Longer I'm Prime Minister, and John Ibbitson of the Globe and Mail and the author of The Big Shift. Welcome to you both. The midterm document, the budget, which came down last week, a lot of aspects to, but one that caught my eye, and that is the sort of unmistakable fixation on 2015. That's the year the budget is going to be balanced. It also happens to be an election year. But isn't it a little bit risky, John, because balancing the budget is not entirely in the government's control?
Well, as you said, there are lots of economists, lots of chief economists of banks who are saying, you know, you can afford to delay a year or 2 more. It would be safe. There's an economic drag to balancing this quickly. But you hit the nail on the head. 2015 is election year. Stephen Harper wants to have a balanced budget in time for that election because there are all sorts of goodies that he can offer people in terms of tax cuts and income splitting and things like that. But he can't do that unless and until the budget is balanced. So it's a hell or high water thing.
Risky, Paul?
Not that much. I mean, it's very risky whether they're going to be able to balance the budget for 2015. But if it's hard, and even if it's impossible, it sets up situations that I think Stephen Harper kind of likes. I don't think they're going to run as the party of plenty in the next election. They're going to run as the party of restraint, the way they did the last 2 times, against a bunch of drunken sailors who want to spend your tax dollars. And that's actually, if there's still a bit of a budget hangover, or a bit of a deficit hangover in 2015, that's actually an easier case to make. We don't even have money that they want to spend. And also, say they're about $8 billion away in the next couple years from budget balance. Then they get to say that they're forced to cut government programs, which is what they were planning to do, hoping to be able to do anyway. So I think by...
Hoping to do because of the ideology of smaller government.
Because they're conservatives,
right.
Yes. And if they... that's why I think when it was unclear between Flaherty and Harper last fall whether they were going to reach that 2015 date, it's unsurprising to me that it was Harper who kind of pushed Flaherty in the back and said, no, we prefer the earlier date. We want to hurry. Because while a lot of us are preoccupied with all the people who didn't vote Conservative and don't like Harper, there's a lot of people who did vote Conservative and actually expect a Conservative government. And Harper plans to deliver.
There's another anniversary going on this year, and that is not just halfway through this majority term, but we're coming up on about 7 years since he was first elected back in 2006. A lot has been written and said about the 7-year slump, and we've seen evidence of that. There's been 2 ministers resign in a month under an ethical cloud. It seems that the discipline of the messaging of the government isn't what it used to be. Is this government going into a dangerous slump, do you think, John?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a middle-aged government. There's no question about that. The polls are showing that it's in the kind of trough that majority governments are generally in halfway through their mandate. Does it have the feel of a tired government that doesn't know why it's governing anymore, but is just, you know, entitled to its entitlements? I don't think so. If you look at that budget, you'll see that they're refederalizing labor training, a program that's enraging the provinces. They're moving with the National Securities Regulator, again, something that's going to make a lot of provinces angry. There's a kind of workfare reform that's being imposed on Aboriginals. Now, you can argue these are bad policies, these are arrogant policies, these are dirigiste policies, but they are the policies of a government that's governing and that has a clear sense of where it wants to go. Maybe the people don't want it to go there, but at least I think it believes it knows where it's going. So middle-aged, but not old yet.
And yet we are seeing polls that show that Harper personally is declining in the polls. He's not seen, at least his level of being a competent economic manager ain't what it used to be. Paul, what do you think?
Well, as always, the only wounds that this government suffers are self-inflicted. The opposition has never managed to lay a glove on it, but Harper is sometimes pretty good at slapping himself in the face. He spent the last year picking a fight with the forces of global environmentalism, and all it got was distraction, an empowered and enraged young Aboriginal movement in the country, an NDP with issues to run around and to run on and something to galvanize their base, and a highly skeptical Obama administration that has a decision to make about Keystone. And And Harper himself knows he's not supposed to do that. In the Conservative war room during election campaigns, there's a sign on the wall that says, "Don't get cute." He got cute last year, and he's been paying the price. That's why this is such a lay-low budget. As a matter of fact, it's not even a budget. There's a reason why they call it an economic action plan on the cover, because if you look in it, it won't tell you how much they're going to spend on defense next year. Harper's low-bridging everything because he got cute last year, and it wasn't a pleasant year for him.
And it may take a while before we find out what those actual numbers are because of the opaqueness of how things are done here in Ottawa in numbers. But let me ask the bigger question then about Stephen Harper, midway through from 2006. Has Stephen Harper changed Canada, or has Canada changed Stephen Harper?
Well, I think it's a bad metaphor, but it's a wave and each is surfing the other. I think what we say in The Big Shift was that Harper recognized that the country was in some ways becoming more conservative, that the immigrants, 250,000 a year that we were bringing in from Asia, Pacific nations, were economically and socially more conservative, that they could be brought into coalition with the West, which was the traditional base, but which is growing in power and wealth. So the country was ready to move in a particular direction. Stephen Harper caught that wave and rode it, and now is himself moving the country in a more conservative direction.
And yet he's not the same Stephen Harper that we saw in 2006. A lot of what he stood for in 2006 has either been delayed or is just simply off the table at this point.
Well, he's always insisted he was more of a strategist than a policy wonk, and nobody believed him. But it's clear that every policy is negotiable as long as he thinks that today it serves the ultimate end, which is a conservative regime that endures. And he always claimed to be an incrementalist and not a radical, and nobody wanted to believe that. And yet he's turning into the Mackenzie King of our time, constantly frustrating, constantly unimpressive, constantly there. And I think this budget is very much in that lineage.
Let me do the unforgivable thing and ask you a question that bears a prediction. From what you have seen so far midway through the term and so on, what's the outlook like for 2015, Paul? I mean, if he is the Mackenzie King of our age, you'd say, well, 2015 will be merely one of many elections that he's going to win.
I think that's his plan. Look, one of these days it's all going to fall apart for him. One of these days he's going to be alone because all the people that he's cut loose are going to cut him loose back. But I am the last guy to predict whether it's going to be next week or 20 years from now. At the next election, he will still be 3 years younger than John Chrétien was when Chrétien was elected Prime Minister the first time. Every election is a crapshoot. But we argue in The Big Shift that the fundamentals of the coalition endure. As Paul says, the opposition hasn't yet laid a glove on him. The opposition remains divided. The Conservative coalition is in place. So all things being equal, in any given election, including the election in 2015, Conservatives should be advantaged. And so if I had to make a prediction, I'd say Harper in 2015.
Okay, we've got that on tape, which we will pull out in 2015. John Ibbitson of the Globe and Mail, Paul Wells of Maclean's Magazine, thank you both very much for being here this morning. Appreciate your time.